While formerly living in a lap of luxury, we allowed the greatest economy on earth to fall apart by living on imports and foreign finance debt. The me-first mentality which drove this country has pushed us into a crisis from which we will not return unless we immediately fix our problems at home.
Well, recovery's just around the corner, right? I mean...
well, actually, we're told we're in the recovery.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. President Obama sounds a lot like President Bush did when he kept saying the fundamentals of the economy are sound. And what are they going to say? That things are going to get worse? You better slit your wrists because they're not going to get better? So it's what they're selling, confidence, hope, and optimism. As a matter of fact, right up here in New York, what they're doing to promote optimism is they're on the Metro cards for the subway, they're printing optimism on it.
Huge layoffs are coming in November and December, and next year there's going to be huge layoffs. And all the corporation CEOs have come in to tell me that's just the beginning. It's not their end result, and this is a very frightening economy.
The Obama administration, from its stimulus package, has spent roughly $158 billion. They created roughly 600,000 plus jobs. When you do the numbers, that comes up to over $240,000 per job. And the annualized average income is about $58,000. So it's a losing situation. They don't have the answers. President Obama said that because of the measures taken, that they have averted depression. No, they haven't. As we said all along, this is only a stimulus recovery.
You know, I think in order to stop it, the government has to start to invest in rebuilding, revamping our industry. Instead of these prop up the economy by build a street, fix a road, this is a temporary fix.
The Obama administration said in February of 2009 that without the stimulus program, unemployment would hit 8% in 2009. And then without it, it would hit 9% in 2010. So they're way off already. And now they're making up these phrases. They call it a jobless recovery. Yeah, how about being almost pregnant? That are lost are going to be lost for good in many areas. You look at manufacturing jobs lost since the Bush administration, it's in the millions. I believe it's about 4 million. And going south or going east.
The job market remains weak.
The United States is in open competition with the same countries from which we buy our goods and finance our government. These countries supply our consumption while simultaneously competing fiercely against our companies in international markets. Nations like India, Japan, and China, along with trade blocs like the European Union, rail against the U.S. when we use protectionism because they do not want to have their unfettered access to our market tampered with. Other countries like Japan and China protect their companies by putting limits and restrictions on the amount of American-made goods flowing into their markets. The United States puts up no such regulations and is thus flooded with foreign-made material. NAFTA and other free trade agreements favor the foreign producers over the United States, and we are told by the WTO and the EU that we cannot and should not protect our own economy. Through free trade, the U.S. must open itself to all foreign interests.
Right. The World Trade Organization is the kind of judge, jury, and court that enforces the free trade globalization regime.
Is the World Trade Organization. organization based in Geneva. The Economist magazine calls it an embryo world government, and yet no one has voted for it. The effect of its policies make it illegal for governments to hinder the profits of big business. This is known as free trade.
If there's one feature about the global economy, it's the companies have globalized. But we haven't regulated the global companies. And that's the change that we've got to put into this international system if we're ever going to get rules that are fairer to workers, fairer to the world's poor, fairer to all of those who are affected by this international production system.
The first thing that we've got to say is we're not going to pit the American people against penny wage labor around the world. And
so in other words, we've got to recognize that there's a large measure of unfairness when we treat underpaid, slave-paid workers in other countries on an equal footing with U.S. workers.
Well, we will say, you know, we could put in an equalizing tariff that would say as other countries bring their level of wages up, that we would reduce the tariff.
We could pay for the legitimate cost of the federal government with a good protective tariff.
There is a misconception surrounding protectionism. Protectionism is often associated with the Great Depression, and the Great Depression, for some reason, is often associated with the protectionist agenda of the Smoot-Hawley tariff in the 1930s. The Smoot-Hawley tariff did not cause the Great Depression. The Depression was caused by many things. The United States was living increasingly in debt. It was increasingly buying things from overseas that could have been produced here. It was watching its manufacturing base dwindle. It was watching its American consumers live increasingly in debt. They were living beyond their means, leveraging their lives on home prices and stock values that were skyrocketing abnormally, well beyond the actual market value. There were a lot of things which destabilized the worldwide economy during the Great Depression, and the Smoot-Hawley tariff actually worked to stabilize American domestic policy. The Smoot-Hawley tariff put a tariff on over 20,000 imported goods. And in a response, many other countries increased their own tariff barriers. What we saw during the 1930s was a general decrease in production and a decrease in international trade. But after the 1930s came the industrial boom of the Second World War in the 1940s, and that boom would have been impossible without the Smoot-Hawley tariff. The Smoot-Hawley tariff effectively protected the United States from cheap foreign labor and foreign goods during its time of economic upheaval. The situation now is much more difficult. America went into the Depression with some productive capacity. We go into this new economic recession or depression with almost no productive capacity. But we could still use protectionist measures to rebuild what has been lost over the last 30 years. We need to reinstitute some sort of protection for our economy.
So we have all these protests against the very organizations that this network has set up to centralize power, including the World Trade Organization. What is that? It has the power to impose massive fines on any country that breaks the trading laws of the World Trade Organization to defend its own economy. Simple thing. If you want to control someone, you must make them dependent upon powers they have no control over. Once people have control over things that affect their lives, they are in control of their own lives. Once they are in the hands of forces they have no control over, they have lost control of their own lives. And that's why we're having the centralization of power, taking decision-making away from the sphere of influence of people affected by those decisions. The idea is to tie up every nation and every area of the world with codependency on some other part of the world, so that no part of the world has the independence to decide their own destiny. That's what outsourcing, as they call it in America, is. Taking jobs and stuff into India and other places, and British companies buying up foreign companies buying up our basic needs like electricity and gas and water. That's what it's about. Taking control over our lives to a point where we have no influence. This is Big Brother.